Picture the most remote place you have ever been. Now, double it. Then, double it again. The Flannan Isles sit 32 kilometers off the coast of Scotland. A cluster of rocks so remote, so brutal, that local fishermen refused to set foot on them for centuries. They called this place the country of the little men, and they believed anyone who stayed too long would never come back. On December 26, 1900, a supply ship approached the island. The lighthouse had been dark for 11 days. 11 days. On one of the most dangerous stretches of coastline in the world, where ships depended on that light to survive the rocks. When the crew finally entered the lighthouse, they found a half-eaten meal still sitting on the table. A chair knocked over beside it. The clock on the wall stopped. And 3 experienced lighthouse keepers completely gone. No bodies, no note, no explanation. To this day, no one knows what happened on that island.
Before we talk about what happened, you need to understand who these men were. Because this is not a story about amateurs who panicked. This is a story about professionals. Men who had spent their entire lives in conditions that would kill most people. James Ducat, the principal keeper, 43 years old, 20 years of lighthouse experience. A man who had survived storms that had sunk ships, destroyed harbors, and killed dozens. He was not the kind of man who frightened easily. Thomas Marshall, first assistant keeper, known among his colleagues for his calm under pressure, the kind of man you wanted beside you when everything was going wrong. And Donald MacArthur, the third keeper, a last-minute replacement for a colleague who fell ill before the posting. MacArthur was considered one of the toughest men on the islands, the kind of man who never showed fear, never showed weakness. He would become important later. On December 7th, 1900, these 3 men took up their posting on Island 1, the largest of the Flannan Isles. Their rotation was 6 weeks on the island, 6 weeks of isolation, 6 weeks of nothing but each other, the sea, and the light. They had done it before. They knew what they were getting into, or so they thought. December 26th, the relief vessel, Hesperus, approached the island. The captain noticed immediately that something was wrong. No one had come to the landing to meet them. The lighthouse flag was not flying. No signals had been given. The light, still dark. Relief keeper Joseph Moore climbed the steps to the lighthouse, alone. The entrance gate was closed, but unlocked. The main door, also unlocked. He stepped inside and called out. Nothing. In the kitchen, a half-eaten meal on the table. A chair knocked over beside it, as if someone had stood up suddenly, in a hurry or in panic. The beds upstairs, empty and unmade. The clock on the wall had stopped, and hanging by the door, 2 oilskin coats missing. But one coat still there, still hanging, exactly where its owner had left it. One of the 3 men had gone outside, without any protection against a Scottish winter storm, in conditions that would kill an unprepared man in minutes. Why?
But the most disturbing discovery was not the abandoned meal. It was not the missing men. It was what they left behind in the logbook. December 12th, Thomas Marshall wrote of severe storms battering the island. But it was what he wrote about his colleagues that stopped investigators cold. He described James Ducat, 20-year veteran, A man who had survived everything the sea could throw at him. As unusually quiet. And Donald MacArthur, the toughest man on the island. Marshall wrote that MacArthur had been crying. December 13th, the storms continued. Marshall wrote that all three men had spent the day praying together. Three experienced lighthouse keepers, men who had seen real danger their entire lives, praying together in terror. December 15th, the final entry. Marshall wrote that the storm had finally eased, that the sky was clearing, that the men were looking forward to going outside. That was the last thing Thomas Marshall ever wrote. The pen was still on the desk, the logbook still open, as if he expected to come back and write more. The investigation found one more detail that no one could explain away. The west landing platform, the side of the island that faced the most violent storms, had been catastrophically damaged. A storage box weighing over 1 ton had been moved from its position. Iron railings had been bent like wire. Solid concrete had been broken and torn away. Whatever wave had struck that platform had been unlike anything ever recorded on those islands. And here is the detail that haunts investigators to this day. Whatever happened on that platform happened to all three men at the same time, because none of them made it back. Not one. 3 men all gone simultaneously, with no one left to raise the alarm, no one left to write a full entry, no one left to tell us what they saw coming. The official conclusion, eventually, was a rogue wave. The theory: all 3 men went to inspect the storm damage on the west platform together. A sudden, enormous wave struck without warning and swept all 3 of them into the Atlantic. It explains the missing coats, the abandoned meal, the damaged platform. But it raises a question that no investigator has ever satisfactorily answered. Why were all 3 men at the most dangerous part of the island at the same time? Lighthouse protocol strictly required at least 1 keeper to remain inside at all times. These men knew the rules. They had followed them for years. So why did all 3 of them break protocol on the same day, in the middle of the worst storm the island had seen? Others have suggested something darker, that weeks of brutal isolation and relentless storms had pushed the men to a psychological breaking point, that the logbook entries, the crying, the praying, the unusual silence were signs of men whose minds were beginning to fracture under the pressure, that what happened on December 15th was not an accident of nature, but something far more human and far more tragic. And then there are those who remember what the local fishermen always knew, that the Flannan Isles had been considered cursed for centuries, that the islands were avoided for a reason, that whatever lived in those rocks, whatever presence had kept fishermen away for generations, had finally claimed what it had always been waiting for. The Flannan Isles lighthouse was automated in 1971. No human keeper has been required since. Perhaps that is for the best. James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, Donald MacArthur, 3 men who walked out of a lighthouse on a clear December morning and simply ceased to exist. No bodies were ever recovered. No definitive answer was ever found. Just a half-eaten meal, a stopped clock, and 1 coat still hanging by the door. waiting for its owner to come back. In over 120 years, the island has told no one what it knows. The vault stays open. The answers do not.
If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Vault of Shadows. Every week, we open a new case, a new dark chapter of history that was buried, hidden, or simply forgotten. What do you think happened to the three keepers? The rogue wave? The isolation? Or something the islands have never revealed? Drop your theory below. Until next time, stay curious, stay shadowy.